Thank you, Shannon, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to our repeat performance of AT Assessment, the why, when, who, and how. And my name is Janet Nunez, and I'm here with
Debbie Drennan.
And we are both Assistive Technology Specialists at Parents Helping Parents. Next slide. We are located in San Jose, California. This photo depicts the front entrance to our building, which is the Sobrato Center for Nonprofits. If you're not already familiar with what we do, we are a family resource center, a family empowerment center, and a parent training and information center. And we've been around for almost 40 years.
Oh my God.
Now we haven't.
No, we're much younger than that.
Years, but Debbie, I think you've been here for what,
a while.
Almost
a while.
20. We've both been in the department, the Assistive Technology Department, for between 15 and 20 years. Our agency serves individuals with disabilities of all disabilities and all ages, as well as their families and the professionals who work with them. And we do that through a variety of supports, including parent and professional trainings on different topics of disability or special education. We do a lot of information referral. We have a fantastic lending library of over 4,000 books and multimedia materials. We have support groups, parent coffees, and we also have a fabulous assistive technology demonstration center.
Absolutely.
Which we call the iTECH Center. And by the way, we serve Santa Clara, San Mateo, San Joaquin, and Santa Cruz counties. But anybody is welcome.
Anybody.
In this photo, you can see a snapshot of a Techsploration. We have a lot of services in our iTECH department. We do a lot of information referral over the phone. You can call us if you have a specific question about what technology is available for a specific task. Our signature service is something called a Techsploration, and there you can see in the photo one of our AT specialists showing some software to a young man. And the Techsploration is a 1-hour customized session in our AT lab in which we explore technology. It is not an assessment. We do not do a trial period. We do not write up a written report with recommendations. We will, however, write up a summary report for an additional fee. We also have Technology for Infants and Preschoolers program, which is run by Debbie, and some low-tech toolkits for loan through our library. We don't lend out other materials from our AT Center, but we do have some toolkits for loan. So one fast way to find out about what we do, because we do so much, is just to really go to our website, www.php.com, services/iTech. Next slide. Here is our disclaimer, Debbie, and we've added this kind of in jest, but it's very true and serious. Up in the right-hand corner, we've included a little photo of a signpost that says lost, confused,
disoriented,
bewildered, perplexed. And that is because we are going to be giving you a lot of information during this hour, and we're going to be talking about a lot of complex systems. So this is really, again, just a brief overview.
Yes.
And we've included a lot of resource websites so that you can get more information on your own, or feel free to call us anytime.
Absolutely.
We're going to be stopping after each of the sections for questions, so if you can hold your questions for that particular section until that time, that might expedite, make sure we can finish on time.
So what exactly will they be learning today?
Well, let's see. We hope, Debbie, next slide please, that the participants will take away kind of a general understanding of what assistive technology assessment looks like in these following systems. In the medical world, in the educational world, under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, what AT assessment looks like if you're in college or university, and also what it would look like through the Department of Rehab, either as a college student or in the employment world. And we're also going to touch on employment if you are not a Department of Rehab client.
Okay. Sounds like a lot.
It is a lot. Next slide, please. So I think we can get the why out of the way first, because it applies to all of the domains. What is the purpose of an AT assessment? And it's pretty straightforward, very simple. We really are just trying to determine if there is a need for assistive technology, and if so, which AT tools are going to meet the need of the student, the client, the patient. But oftentimes we need an assessment. An assessment is required because it will meet the criteria for a funding source.
Okay. So what types of AT assessments are we talking about then?
Well, as you know, assistive technology is any tool, and it can be in any area of disability or need. So you can have assessments in the area of communication, mobility, switch or computer access. In the educational world, we see a lot of assessments for learning issues, for reading and writing. But you can always also have assessments to find technology for independent living skills, life skills, or leisure or recreation.
And worksite modifications too, right?
Exactly.
Okay, good.
All right, so next slide. Another area that we are going to apply kind of some general best practices would be regarding what an AT assessment report should include. And Debbie, we have seen many, many reports across our desk over the many, many years that we've been here. And what we will tell you is that
they're all different.
They're all different. There are no two AT reports that look alike. And we've seen some that are a page long, and we've seen some that are 15 pages long. So there's no real standardization. What we are taking the best practices here to define the elements that should be included in a report. And that would include, of course, a brief client profile, background information on the client, and most importantly, what is the reason we are assessing? Define the goal for the technology. We are trying to determine technology to help calm the student when he is in a stressful situation. We are trying to find technology to help the child greet his peers every morning, etc. So that's very, very important. We've seen reports where there is no goal, there is no reason for the assessment. So make sure that's in there. And then, of course, the procedure, the process, and any instruments you're using, the description you need to include of the technology you're trying, and also the results of that trial period. After you collect the data, you want to be able to justify the reasons for making those recommendations. And we also do like to include, I didn't add this here, but I know that Debbie, you add that. We used to do assessments, by the way, but we no longer do full formal assessments, is a listing of the resources of the technology that was tried, where you can purchase it. The cost can also be helpful for the funder.
Correct. And the other thing to know, too, is depending on the funding source, there may be very specific requirements that that AT report has. So it really does depend on the funding source as well, if there's any additional specific requirements each report needs to have.
And that's especially true in the medical world.
Oh, absolutely. So let's start there. Let's start in the medical world. We're going to talk about private insurance and Medicare, as well as in our state we call it Medi-Cal, which is a Medicaid program in the medical world. So next slide. When you're doing an AT assessment in the medical world, when would an AT assessment need to be done? And in the medical world, they call assistive technology durable medical equipment, or DME, or they call it orthotics or prosthetics. And usually an AT assessment is done when the physician determines that there is a medically necessary need for these tools. Now, I put here that private medical insurance may or may not have DME coverage. I think under Obamacare regulations, most of them are required now to have that, but I'm not exactly sure on that piece of it yet. I'm still doing research on that because this is still pretty new. I've been looking around to try to find medical insurances that do not have medical DME coverage, and I haven't found them yet. However, having said that, understand that the durable medical equipment they may cover may be capped at an allowable amount. For example, Medicare covers 80% of an allowable amount for a wheelchair, for a walker, for a raised toilet seat. So they put a cap on their fees. So that's something to be looking out for in the private medical insurance world as well. And under Medi-Cal, it covers 100% of, again, that allowable fee, which can be pretty low when you think about some of the more specialized equipment that people might need. So be careful. Check on that. Next slide.
So, Debbie, what are some examples of some medical AT?
Well, some examples would be hearing aids, speech prosthetics, or AAC. That's kind of a big thing in the AT world.
Oh, that's alternative?
Augmentative and alternative communication devices. And in the medical world, they're called speech prosthetics. Wheelchairs, of course. A lot of people don't know, but talking pill containers are considered durable medical equipment and can be covered under your medical insurance, so something to look for. Prosthetic limbs, eyeglasses, those sorts of things are considered medical assistive technology or durable medical equipment. So now in the medical world, who exactly would be then doing the full AT assessment? Generally, it's going to be a contracted vendor of that medical insurance company. They will tell you who to go to. So it would be checking with your durable medical equipment office of the insurance company. That would be who would then direct you appropriately. And some of the people that might be would be a speech pathologist if you're looking for an AAC device, a seating and positioning specialist, generally RESNA certified if you're looking for mobility, customized mobility or seating device.
And we'll talk about RESNA a little bit later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit. An orthotist if you're looking at a prosthetic. So these are contracted vendors for very specific types of assistive technology. So how would that look like? What would an AT assessment look like in the medical world? Well, the first thing to understand is that generally you don't need a full AT assessment if you're looking to rent a wheelchair for 3 months that is standard issue equipment. You would simply get a prescription for a standard wheelchair. You would go to talk to your DME office. They'll let you know where to go. That is a contracted vendor for that. You go and you rent your wheelchair. No customization needed. Usually you don't need an AT assessment. So if you're doing an AT assessment in the medical world, it's because you need customized tools. So how does it look? In the private insurance Medicare world, you would start with a physician prescription. And then this also holds for the Medi-Cal world or the Obamacare insurances as well. You always start with that physician prescription. You start the same. You get the doctor's prescription. The second piece for the private insurance and the Medicare world, and this includes private insurance under Obamacare, if it is a piece of specialized or customized equipment, you will need or may need additional justifications from those specialists in that area that the equipment is. So if it's an AAC device, you'll need some justifications for the device from a speech therapist, for example. And always, the durable medical equipment department of that insurance company has ultimate approval of that purchase. So you may have a speech therapist saying yes, the physician saying yes, this person needs this device, the specialist agreeing with the physician, and the durable medical equipment department saying no. And then you have to go through an appeal process. And again, for any of this to happen, you have to use insurance-approved vendors to get the full benefit of your durable medical equipment benefit. Under Medi-Cal, there's another step thrown in there just to make it fun, and that you need to get a TAR, a Treatment Authorization Request. And I've included a website on the slide if you wanted to get more information about what a Treatment Authorization Request looks like, where do I get it, how do I do that. And it has to be, if you're using Medi-Cal, it has to be from a vendor that accepts the Medi-Cal rates for the equipment. And there's fewer and fewer vendors out there because the Medi-Cal rate is again, very low in comparison, especially for customized equipment. And this can be a lengthy process for specialized equipment, the justification, and then the assessment. So let me kind of go into that in the how on the next slide. So for example, you need a power wheelchair. Now this is a real-world example. My son uses power wheelchairs. We have gone through this a couple of different times. So the first thing the doctor does is write a prescription for an assessment for the power wheelchair. That's what's needed first. That prescription goes to the insurance durable medical equipment office, where they approve that need for the assessment for a power wheelchair. They then send that approval on to the provider, in this case it's the mobility specialist, to do the assessment for the power wheelchair needs. We go into the provider then sends their findings and recommendations back to the durable medical equipment office. The durable medical equipment office then reviews the findings and recommendations. They may ask clarification questions, and then once they've approved it, they send that on back to the doctor with a request for a specific prescription for that specific customized device. The doctor then sends that prescription back to the durable medical equipment office, who then processes it and sends authorization to the provider, who finally gets around to ordering it. Wow. Yes, it can take months.
Yeah, so you said lengthy, like
lengthy.
We're talking months?
Months. We have had, because remember, in all of these steps, depending on who you're working with, paperwork can get lost. People can sit on it. It can get stuck on a desk somewhere. So this is where you need to really learn as a client to advocate for yourself and find out where is the paperwork. Where are we in this process?
To be on top of it.
To be on top of it. And we have had it take as long as 6 months and as short as 3. So
3 months is the shortest?
For us.
Okay.
Others may have had better experiences. But that's our experience on specialized customized power wheelchairs. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about the medical? Here we have a question from Joe. Who is it best to follow up with? Generally what we do when we're dealing with customized equipment is we try to follow the paper trail. Once the doctor's written that prescription, the first place I call is the vendor that I know the company uses, the durable medical company uses, and I ask if they've received anything yet. If they've not received it, then I go back to the DME office and say, have you received it? Because then I know that's where it's sitting. So I try to follow the paper trail, knowing what that trail might be to follow up. So it really depends on where you're at in the process, because if you've already gone in for your evaluation with the mobility specialist, you know it's stuck between the vendor or the DME office again. So you can contact the DME office, hey, have you received the paperwork from the vendor yet? And if they have, then you can say, okay, has the doctor written a prescription? So you can just follow up and see where they're at in the process. That's what I generally do.
Okay, great. Any other questions on the medical system in AT assessment?
Okay, well let's move into my next question in the education realm. For education, this often comes up, is do you need a full AT assessment anytime you need to get any equipment?
Well, you don't, Debbie, actually, and we're going to talk about that in just a second, when you need a full formal assessment. But first, I just wanted to clarify a few acronyms and terms. Today we're going to be talking about education under IDEA, and we're going to be talking about those students ages 3 to 22 who have an IEP.
Okay. What about students with a 504? Can they also get assistive technology?
They can.
Okay.
Yes, they can, but they are covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act, under a different set of laws. But for our intents and purposes today, we're going to really be just sticking to those students who are receiving services, special education services, and are covered under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Next slide, please. So you just asked a very interesting question about when does a student require a full AT assessment? And for those of you who have not seen or listened to our webinar on consideration, which is really the first step, all students who are receiving special education must be considered for assistive technology. And
that webinar is an AT Network webinar in their archives. You can go look that up.
Right.
Yeah.
So after the consideration process, you're basically going to know whether you need to take the next step for assessment. But basically when the student is not making progress toward their IEP goals and objectives, or when the student cannot access the curriculum, and also if the IEP, which is the Individualized Education Plan team feels that the student or believes the student could be more independent by using some technology, then an AT assessment may be required.
So what are some examples of AT in education?
Next slide. Well, we see communication systems and devices oftentimes in the school setting. Many times these are low tech. They can be picture boards, picture books, symbol sets, visual schedules, tools for fine motor such as pencil grips and handwriting guides, computer access tools. We'll also see switch systems, text-to-speech software, word prediction, voice recognition, things to help with math such as a talking calculator or even a simple non-talking calculator.
Well, now I have a question for you regarding the communication systems, or the AAC. My understanding is that school districts can ask to use a person's Medi-Cal, and they have a parent sign the form. So then is the school buying the AAC device if that parent has signed the approval to have them school use AAC?
That's a good question. The school may ask the parent to give consent to use the Medi-Cal, but it's strictly voluntary. A family or parents do not have to give consent, and actually, if they do give consent, it can be revoked at any time in writing. You don't have to call another IEP meeting to do that.
Okay.
However, what would be the benefit of going through Medi-Cal to purchase the device? It would become the property of the student then. Otherwise, the device would remain the property of the school.
Oh, I see.
But there are some things to look out for.
Yes.
And Debbie, those would be?
To be aware of if a family does choose to sign over their Medi-Cal, to allow the school to use it for purchasing of devices. They can also use it for speech therapy for their students, and as well as providing a health aid for the student in school if that is needed. And if the school is using your Medi-Cal, you cannot go outside of the school system and use your Medi-Cal to get additional speech therapy or additional health aid if you should need that. So it is something to be aware of.
Correct. The other thing that we might want to add here is that if the student has both Medi-Cal and private insurance, then private insurance must be used first before Medi-Cal will kick in. Okay. So now we're going to talk about who Debbie, in the educational world can do assessment. This is the million-dollar question.
Yes.
At least once a month, somebody will call and say, who is qualified to do an AT assessment for my child?
And who is that?
Who is that? Well, we dug around a lot in the law because there isn't much said about assistive technology specifically. AT assessments. What we could find is that in general, assessments must be conducted by personnel who are trained and knowledgeable, and that goes for any assessment under special education. So all we know is that a person must be trained and knowledgeable, and that is the law under the IDEA. So that doesn't tell us too much.
No, it sure doesn't.
Who is trained and knowledgeable? Who could be trained and knowledgeable? Well, we could, of course, have school personnel, the classroom teacher, speech therapist, occupational therapist, resource specialists. All of those would be trained and knowledgeable. But the county, the district may also have a dedicated AT specialist. So that person could be used in combination with any of the other specialists or school personnel. But you could also have outside AT professionals come in to conduct an AT assessment on a student. And the California Diagnostic Centers, there are 3 of them in Los Angeles, Fremont, and Fresno, may also be contacted by schools to help them in determining supports for students, and that may include assistive technology.
Yes. Generally, they take the more complex students, correct?
The school would have to show that they've already tried everything that they know, but do not have the expertise or the knowledge in order to determine what those supports would be. So important to note that California does not have any licensing or certification standards for AT specialists.
At this time, it is being looked at in the law. The other thing to be aware of too is that if you are using the student's Medi-Cal to purchase, for example, an AAC device, you then default to whatever Medi-Cal requires that person who's writing the report for their certifications. Generally, it has to be a certified speech therapist.
It seems that Medi-Cal has the most requirements.
Exactly, it does, and they pay the least.
Okay. Okay, but digging a little bit deeper,
because we don't know when to stop.
Oh, exactly. I thought there has to be something written about assistive technology. Well, in the California Code of Regulations, the only thing that I could find were qualifications for staff from non-public schools and agencies.
And what's a non-public school?
So a non-public school is a school, an outside school that is contracted by the State Department of Education to provide services for their special ed students.
Okay, so it's not the charter schools. This is different.
It is different.
Okay.
And they also are not independent contractors.
Got it.
So this does not apply to independent contractors. These would be strictly for staff in non-public schools and agencies. And so it says that those people would need to have either a license in physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech pathology, a degree in engineering, a degree in, in rehab technology, or certification from RESNA. You mentioned that earlier, the Rehabilitation, Engineering, and Assistive Technology Society of North America. A certificate in assistive technology applications from an accredited post-secondary institution, or a special ed credential.
Wow. Okay.
So we could see that a school staff certainly would have one or more of these qualifications.
But how would an outside person get a credential in assistive technology, or certificate? Right?
Well, a certificate, there are some, in fact, there are many online programs throughout the state. But the two in California that most often come up for us are the California State University Dominguez Hills program, as well as Cal State Northridge, the CSUN program. Okay. And those are online hours. I think Northridge has a combination program where there's some done in person, but check the websites there. The one thing I want to point out is that both Cal State University Dominguez Hills and Northridge are courses of study that actually will teach you, they'll train you on assistive technology, whereas RESNA is it's an exam.
Okay.
You are not being taught anything. Your knowledge will be validated if you pass an exam.
Okay, so and then once you pass the exam, you get what? You become an ATP, an assistive technology practitioner, correct?
Correct.
Which is different, and you have to, as I understand it, I don't have my ATP, but you have to follow up with continuing education units and show that your knowledge continues every 3 years.
Right. I think you also have to pay.
Exactly. You pay a fee. Right.
Right.
So there is that. But so that is, I think, mobility specialists generally have their RESNA ATP in mobility specialty.
Right. So again, do you have to have a certificate in order to provide services?
Not at this time.
If you are an outside contractor, check with your school district or SELPA, which is a special ed local plan area, to see if they have any specific
and it looks here that San Diego State Interwork Institute has a certificate program as well. So that's good to know. Good to know. Thank you. So that's one we can add to our list. Okay, so let's get into the how. Quickly, how do you initiate the process? It may be an IEP team decision. It just happens after consideration. You decide that a full assessment is the next logical step for the student, but also the parent may request, and definitely should be in writing, not preferably, at any time. If the school agrees, in fact, they are obligated to respond. Especially in writing. Yes. They are required to respond in writing within 15 days. And if they agree that, yes, the student should have an assessment, then they will provide an assessment plan, which would need to be signed by the parent to give permission to be assessed. And again, how? There are many different ways to conduct assessment. These are best practices that I've listed here. The only requirements by law is that the school district does have 60 days in which to conduct the assessment, and that it does need to be conducted in the student's customary environment. And of course, we already know it needs to be conducted by somebody who's trained and knowledgeable. The other
bullet points here, that it be conducted by a team approach with the student and family involved. Those are really best practices. We would hope to see that. It is very important to have the family involvement and to have people who are knowledgeable about the student, the curriculum, the disability, the AT may be helpful. We also think that certainly a trial period
is important.
Conducted. I think
if possible.
The word here that I think for all assessment reports is that it should be defensible.
Yes.
I mean, if you're showing a report where nobody did a trial period, that's not going to really hold up for due process or in court, so to speak. The trial period may vary. It could be anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. Data collection, we mentioned already, is very important, and you're going to make those recommendations based on that data.
Okay. So what tools can people use when they're in the education world to actually do an assessment? What are some tools you might see?
Yeah, fortunately for us, a lot of experts in the field have already developed some very handy tools. One is the ASNAT manual, the Assessing Students' Needs for AT from WADI, the Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative, and that's available for download, as well as the very popular SET framework, the Student Environment Task and Tools. There are so many things out there. Just Google it, and no need to create your own tools. Also, the AT Network, once again, if you're interested in listening to us, you can refer back to, in their archive section, to our overview of AT assessment tools.
And we have a link to that one for you.
Right. Here are some additional resources. You can find out more information, guidelines for AT assessment, and also going back to the AT Network website, under the Find It Now tab, they do provide a list of AAC assessment providers and certified RESNA professionals and AT centers.
Okay, very good. Are there any questions that anyone has about assistive technology assessment in the education world?
Okay, so we're probably confusing them at a much higher level now. All right.
Okay, homework is, if someone has a good question about what about homework. If someone needs assistive technology in order to do their homework and it is written into the IEP, then they do need to provide that assistive technology for them to do their homework. It just needs to get written into their IEP that they need it for homework. That was a good question. That does come up a lot too.
And extended core curriculum for vision impaired students.
I'm not quite sure what the extended core curriculum is. Again, if it is written into, if assistive technology is written into their IEP plan, the assistive technology needs to be funded by the school district that student is a member of. Again, it's all about getting it written into the IEP plan.
Right, and if the student needs the technology in order to progress towards his educational goals, then the technology is funded, is provided by the school district.
Okay, so I hope that answers some of those questions.
And we'll be happy to answer more of your questions after. We can stay a few minutes if there's time in the classroom, and also email or call us anytime.
Absolutely. Those are good questions.
So Debbie, what happens after graduation from high school?
Well, it depends on the student, but let's say that the student wants to go into a college or a university, and they need to have assistive technology to continue their education in the college or university. Well, as many of you know, there are no IEPs in college. We have drummed that home, I hope, enough in all the many different things we have done. But colleges and universities are required by law to provide equal access to students with disabilities if that college receives any federal funding. So that means if the college is receiving federal funding for research for something, then they are required to provide equal access to their students with disabilities. Most colleges receive federal funding. Some of the small private Christian or other faith-based colleges may not, and in which case they are not required to provide that equal access. And I've got a website if you want some more information about what the college responsibilities are to students with disabilities. The student has an obligation, if they need assistive technology, to disclose their disability to the college in order to receive services. And you can bring your current IEP or 504 plan if you have one. And if you do, make sure and if you're already using assistive technology when you're entering college, make sure that assistive technology is documented on your plan, okay? If you're a student who has nothing available documenting your disability, find out from the college what documentation is needed. Because again, nothing happens unless you self-disclose the disabilities, and most colleges require documentation of a disability. In California, most institutions require that some sort of documentation be done within the last 3 years. So somewhere in the last 3 years before you enter college, you have to have a reevaluation or a reassessment done saying, yes, indeed, you still have dyslexia, or you still have cerebral palsy, or yes, you're still blind.
But they could use their documentation from high school.
They can use the documentation from high school. Again, check with the college to see what they need in order for you to receive any service from the disability office. So when would someone go in and do this? Because that can be off-putting for a lot of students. A lot of students come in and they can struggle with college-level writing, college-level test-taking, note-taking, reading. These students then should ask for accommodations and accommodations. But remember, the accommodations and modifications cannot fundamentally alter the nature of the service, program, or activity. So if you're someone who needs a longer period of time, for example, to understand material, you cannot ask that a semester class be made into a full year class so that you can understand the material. That is fundamentally altering the nature of that class. However, you can say, I need fewer classes and still be considered a full-time student because the nature of my disability means I take longer to understand material. And so you can be considered a full-time student and be taking only, say, 8 units instead of 12 or 16. And that is an accommodation that can happen.
Or time and a half.
Or time and a half on a test, for example. Again, self-disclosure is required to receive any accommodations. Again, what kind of assistive technology might you need in college? Think ahead. Try to get these things assessed during your high school transition period. If you do need additional technology or your needs do change in college, you have the Disabled Student Program available at your college, or person, I should say, because it's not always an office. Or you can always, the Disabled Student Program may ask you to connect in with the Department of Rehab as a resource as well for your assistive technology needs.
And we'll talk more about that.
I'll talk more about that when I talk about Department of Rehab.
So what kinds of technology might you find in college, Debbie?
Well, some examples of assistive technology in college would be things like the smart pens, where you write and it records the audio as you're writing. Text-to-speech software, just like in high school or the K through 12 world. Voice recognition software. Word prediction and spell checking software, magnification software, assistance with transportation around a campus if you have mobility impairments, note-taking. These are all some examples of assistive technology in college. Notice I did not say anything about personal assistive technology. Assistive technology that a college will provide is not your personal AT. So if you need, for example, a wheelchair to get around campus, the college will not provide a wheelchair. They can provide you with a cart that they will drive you from place to place, from your dorm to the college classroom and back, but they will not provide you with a wheelchair if that is what your need is. That is something you need to find on your own.
Okay.
So here's the question. Who in college would do an AT assessment? Well, here's where it gets very dependent on the college. Generally, if it's a larger college, you'll have a disabled students program at the college.
That's the DSP.
The DSP, and they can call it DSS, Disabled Student Services. There's different acronyms for it. And they will create a service contract with the student which documents what their accommodations and AT needs might be. They may provide an AT exploration if needed, but generally they will just look at the tools that are currently available at that college or university. This is not a formal assessment, and generally there's no written report attached to it. It's just an exploration of tools. If you feel as a student that that's not enough, or you're at a small college, for example, and you don't have an office, but you have the dean of students who is stepping in to provide accommodations for students, and they don't have the knowledge, you might need to get a private AT assessment and pay out of pocket and purchase your own private AT, or then access AT tools, or tell the college, these are the AT tools that I need you to provide to me. Again, it depends on the college. Okay. If you are a Department of Rehab client, stay tuned. I'll tell you how that works in a minute. Okay. So are there any, let's talk about how. Right, what is the process? So again, self-disclosure. Connect with the DSP office or Dean of Students, whoever is handling accommodations for their students with disabilities. You have to self-disclose what your needs, that you have a disability and that you have some needs. Again, the AT assessment is not necessary to acquire tools. You can have a history of using AT. There are less stringent requirements to acquiring those tools than in the elementary and secondary education. And is it consistent across colleges? No, because every college is different.
And we have a question.
Okay, does this mean that colleges are not required to provide AT assessments? Exactly, they're not. They are not required to provide AT assessments. They are required to provide accommodations, but not AT assessment. And so you come into a college and you say, I am an individual who is low vision, I need magnification software. And electronic text, for example. The college can say, okay, here's the electronic text that you need, and here is a magnification software that you can use. And this magnification software will be available to you in our computer resource lab for your homework. And the computer resource lab is open until 11 o'clock every night. And they have met your accommodation needs. Mm-hmm. So no, they are not required to provide AT assessments in college.
Great. Okay, any other questions? I know it does get a little
confusing.
So let's see if anybody else has a question. If not, we're going to
move on to employment. And here I will also be talking about employment for someone who's already employed and needs assistive technology because they already have employment. And I'm also going to be talking about Department of Rehab. And Department of Rehab clients are clients who have a disability and are actively looking for skills and tools to attain an employment goal. And these are information about how that can work is available to you at a website that I'm having Janet type in right now.
Finger by
finger, and that's information under the ADAAA about assistive technology and employment. And it's different publications that are put out about that. So you can be a Department of Rehab client if you're a student with a disability who needs to have assistive technology and a college degree to achieve your employment goal. And that's how you as a college student can become a DOR client. So let's go to the next page.
Yes.
Well,
unfortunately, I can't see what I'm typing, so I don't know if it's right. But
so we'll get
hopefully
that it's right. Yeah, in a minute you'll get that website. It'll be in the chat box.
What are some examples of AT?
Some examples of AT you might find in the work world would be alternative keyboards and mice for those with physical needs. A voice-to-text software, again. Magnification tools would be something else you might find in the work world. Some alternative and accessible phones might be another thing you would find if someone needs a non-traditional telephone in order to do their job. And modifications to the desk or the workplace for access would also be something you might find. So let's go on to the next slide as to when. When would you need this AT assessment in the work world? Well, when would be if you become newly disabled or there is a change in your existing disability, then you might need an assessment. Also, another time you might need an AT assessment in the work world is if you are given new job tasks that are impacted by an existing disability. For example, we have worked with adults with dyslexia who have received a promotion at work which increases their load for reading and writing, and now they realize they need assistive technology in order to fulfill the new job task that that promotion has given them. And another time you might need it is when you are exiting the education system and going into employment, and that does include needing a college degree for that employment outcome. And that's Department of Rehab might be where you want to go there. So we have the website typed in. Hopefully you got the right one.
Yeah.
We'll see. So anyway, who would do that assessment? In the employment world, if you are not a Department of Rehab client, the employer may determine who will do that assessment. And each employer will have their own process. You as the employee need to go to your Human Resources Department and self-disclose a need. So let's go on to the next slide about that. So how?
How do they do that?
You would go to the Human Resources Department, and it's up to the employer then to determine who, if anyone, assesses for the assistive technology. Now the Human Resources Department may require physician or other documentation of your disability. And I'm working with a woman right now who has a long-standing history of dyslexia, and she's now going to be turning 60, and her work world is requiring her doctor to say she has dyslexia, and her doctor's going, well, I don't know if you have dyslexia. How do I determine that? So it can be a little weird, and she's working with a Human Resources Department to see if she can get it waived based on the fact that it's long-standing. You can also, if you are a Department of Rehab, if you're not a Department of Rehab client and your needs are complex, for example, you become disabled due to an accident, Department of Rehab can add, and your employer still wants to have you stay as an employee, but you have more complex needs, your employer can ask if you would be willing to become a Department of Rehab client to assist them in determining your AT needs.
Is that voluntary?
To maintain employment. It is voluntary. You do not have to, but they can ask you to do that. And you can say, no, I'm not interested. I want you to take this on. And they can talk to you about that. So if you are a Department of Rehab client, if you do decide to become a DOR client, the assessment and the tools, assistive technology tools, will be provided by vendors of, where are you?
Sorry. Go back.
There you are, approved by Department of Rehab. Now a lot of people are wondering, who are those vendors? I have included a link here, and that's now in your chat box, of where you can find those Department of Rehab vendors who do assessment and provide assistive technology tools for the state of California. And just remember, Department of Rehab has assistive technology tools divided into 3 different categories: rehabilitation engineering, assistive technology devices, and assistive technology services. So that's who would do if you are a DOR client. Now, how would you get that assessment done? Well, if you're a DOR client, talk to your counselor and have your assistive technology needs written into the individual plan for employment.
IPE.
The IPE, right. And the AT needs must be specific to your employment goals. So if you're a student going into college with a disability, you choose to become a Department of Rehab client because you need that college degree for a specific employment goal. You can become a Department of Rehab client, get your IPE to state that you need an assistive technology assessment in order to access the curriculum appropriately and do your homework at the college level. And they will have an assessment, AT assessment done for you to get those AT needs to you so that you can achieve your college degree, which will help you gain your employment goal.
Okay.
And remember, the Department of Rehab counselor arranges for that assessment with those contracted vendors. Okay? So there are some resources, and a really great resource for employers and employees is the Job Accommodation Network. This is a great resource for those who are already in employment, whose job says, no, you don't need to go to DOR, I just don't know what to do. I don't know what's available. The employer can go on to askjan.org and say, this is an employee who has carpal tunnel syndrome. I'm not sure what accommodations are available for somebody. They're saying they need something. And askjan.org will provide them with a list of tools to try, suggested tools that might be helpful. So they're really, really good. It's a great resource. Another thing to be aware of is for small businesses. A lot of people ask, what about small businesses of 12 people? Under ADA, employers with 15 or more employees are required to provide reasonable accommodations unless it causes the employer undue hardship.
Financial.
Any undue hardship. Could be financial, could be something else. So it really depends. If it's an employer that has less than 15, they're not covered under ADA. So
they're not required?
They're not required. So something to be aware of. Okay?
Right.
Are there any questions about employment at this point? Or Department of Rehab and Assistive Technology? Or
in any area? We're open for questions. Feel free to type in the chat box, or if you'd like to speak, turn on your mic.
And if there are no questions, that's okay. Go ahead, and someone does have a quick question. Let's hear it. Should never step away, Derek.
Hello?
What's your question, Derek?
Hi.
Yes, hello.
Hi. Thank you again so much, you two, for putting together this presentation. I always enjoy participating and learning more, and just always appreciate your help in this. My question is, when working with DOR, some clients, either ones that have gone to them in the past, or have heard from other people that there might be kind of like a hierarchy of need as far as being able to get their needs met, dependent on, most severe disability and going on down the list through that. What is your approach when talking to somebody when they come up with this question regarding, how long would it take? Would it even be possible? Such and such, depending on the hierarchy of need and how much DOR has to offer. Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's a legitimate. There is if you are an individual with a disability and you apply to Department of Rehab, they have a 3-tiered system for acceptance for individuals with disabilities. If you fall into the first tier, and at this point also the second tier, you will receive services right away. In other words, your disability is impacted enough so that, yes, we can see a real need, and that without our assistance, we understand that it would be very, very difficult for you to achieve employment. It's when you fall into the third tier of disability that you will have to wait. The last time I checked, and I haven't checked in a while, the last time I checked, you were not going to be receiving services if you fell into the third tier for at least a year. So it really does depend on their determination of your level of disability and your ability to become employed. Okay. Is that in writing anywhere in terms of how they determine levels? I've not been able to find it. I'm sure it's somewhere in the DOR world. I just don't know where to find that particular information about what level or what tier somebody might fall into before they even apply. So I'm sorry, I can't help you there. But yes, you're right, Derek, there is a tiered level for actual acceptance into Department of Rehab. Are there any other questions?
Or if any participants have any further information on that topic,
please share.
If you'd like to share or chime in, please feel free to do so. Here's our question. Does SELPA pay for AT for students with IEPs?
No, but yes, but no. Here's what I mean. The SELPA is the Special Education Local Planning Area, and that's generally, if it's a very large district like the LA Unified School District, they're their own SELPA. Other areas, they have several school districts come together to be the SELPA. School districts are ultimately responsible for paying for the AT for a student with a disability in their district. However, if you have a low incidence disability, there's a special pot of money that the SELPA uses to pay for AT. And to be a low incidence disability would be someone who is blind, low vision, or
deaf, hard of hearing,
physically disabled. That's it. And that is your only or primary disability. Then you would qualify for that special pot of funding called low incidence disability funding, and that is paid for by the SELPA. So I hope that answers that question. Probably clear as mud, I know. Okay. So if there's no other questions, it is 11:30. We thank you for your time. Or if you do come up with a question later, that's okay. And somehow we got to a weird web place here, so we apologize. So we're supposed to have, there it is, the survey. So thank you everyone for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Debbie and Janet. We always love having you guys present for us and sort of repeating this webinar for us. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you so much for everyone for coming to today's webinar.